What's up, guys? Welcome to the Coffee Lab episode 3, and I am so excited for you today. Today we have Ben Carlson, who co-founded Long Miles Coffee with his wife Christy in 2013. He comes with 20 years of coffee experience from his start as a frothy cappuccino and Highlander grog drinking barista in college to now building and producing coffee at 3 washing stations in Burundi, 1 on Mount Kenya in Kenya, and about to start a construction on their farm and washing station in western Uganda. Long Miles Coffee is built around the values of coffee, people, and potential, which I absolutely love. Their vision is to impact their communities positively and generationally with specialty micro lot coffee as the economic driver for their business. Cup of Excellence number 3 and number 8 winners, and currently drinking a special Heads and Micro Lot from Passenger. Ben, how's it going? What's up, man?
Man, Michael, thanks for having me. This is great. I'm really glad to be on this. And I tell you, just before we start, I gotta say, I got a young boy who didn't think much of me and my coffee business, but when he heard that I was gonna be on your Twitch stream, all of a sudden, big deal. Like,
oh,
I'm gonna
really?
be live twitching because he feels like he's the apex king.
There you go.
He's like, drop it that Nao and Miles could just join in on the 2 boys in Africa, their YouTube channel, and they'll blow up on Apex.
I know, huh?
On your next,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
We're not there yet, but we're getting there. But we're doing some fun stuff. So.
Well, sweet. Well, thanks for having me, Michael. Yeah. Long Miles really started off in 2010 when I moved to Burundi. Actually, I first went there as a consultant. There was the nation had just gone into really a privatization of the coffee sector, and so the government had owned all the coffee and kind of like controlled the whole aspect of it. And so then in 2010, they kind of loosened that up and said, okay, anybody who wants to come and do coffee, come and do coffee. So I went in as a consultant for some coffee traders to find out if there's any good coffee. And after I went around the country and I cupped the coffee, and I don't know who's all watching, but cupping coffee is like essentially like slurping coffee, tasting coffee,
right.
A wine tastings of coffee, and then spitting it out and then saying, oh, that's really good or that's not very good.
Right.
What are the flavor points? On a 100-point scale, what does it score? And I'm a Q grader, so it was kind of one of those things where you're trained to like score it and then give attributes.
Yeah, and essentially for people who are watching real fast, like Q grading and cupping is essential to high quality coffee. You have to know exactly what you're doing and have the experience, which he has. So continue. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. So I go around the country. So this is early 2009, 2010. I go around the country visiting all these washing stations, cupping this coffee, and I'm blown away. Here, like, really, at that point, like, nobody knew, but Burundi was like this hidden gem. There was some coffee leaking out, and I think Stumptown and Intelligentsia.
Rightfully so,
they were like the early third wave, like making waves, counterculture. Those 3 were in the country just kind of exploring things.
Right.
And they would start taking coffee. So I can't say that I discovered it and I wasn't the first to drink this amazing coffee, but I realized that even these guys, they just barely scratched the surface. There was so much more to see and to discover and to produce. And I saw the coffee, I saw all the people that were working so hard, but the most important, I saw the potential.
Right.
Like, however good it was, it could get so much better.
Yeah. So, which is huge because like even when I started my coffee journey, like about 8 years ago, I didn't see a lot of Burundis. I really didn't. But the ones that I had, I started to, I'm like, wow, oh my God, this is like incredible. Like Brandy wine and like all these other roasters that were roasting they roast every other coffee delicious, but Burundi was just standing out. And I'm like, doing a little bit more research, and sure enough, like I'm seeing it pop up, Long Miles, whatever, on Instagram, and following you guys for like the last like 5 years and seeing all these delicious crops come in. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like when I think of a Burundi, if it's this delicious, chances are it's from you guys. Like it's just that's just the way it is. Like, and for me, I'm like, oh, Burundi's, Long Miles, they have the best. So if you find a coffee that's roasted by them, not roasted by them, but imported, and the roaster has it, chances are it's like phenomenal.
Well, I appreciate that. And it's one of those things where that was what we discovered when I was like first in the country, and I was cupping this coffee, and I'm like, this coffee is delightful. I mean, this is potentially the best coffee in the world. Mm-hmm. And most of it's getting blended into your Folgers or instant coffee, and it's like a waste,
right.
Like just seeing something beautiful flushed away.
So do you have, and you would know this, but are there particular origins or particular farms that, like you said, get blended in with Folgers or these large corporations that are not producing, but they're selling coffee on the shelf?
Well, yeah, and I think, one good reference point, you could put this in your show notes, is if people go back to, I don't know if you ever listened to the Daily podcast by the New York Times. There's I think it was last Sunday, they did an episode on just jungle coffee. And it's a beautiful explanation of essentially Indonesia, these islands, and this rainforest with like the last like Bengal tigers in the wild. Yeah. Getting like the whole rainforest is getting clear cut essentially by smallholder farmers to make instant coffee.
Oh wow.
And these big multinationals, they name it in the episode. I'm not going to name them on your show, but like
no, you're good.
Like, yeah, they're buying up this illegal coffee because it's all about cheap coffee. That's the thing. Mm-hmm. That's what being put into, like in coffee or these commodity coffees, because the reality is the coffee industry, and that's what I went into when I started Burundi. I started just being a coffee trader, and as a coffee trader, your job is to find the best coffee and give the lowest price for it, and to make it sustainable. Mm-hmm. But
that's the only way you can make it a large business sustainable is being cheap on a large scale. Unfortunately, that's it. Yep. Aaron has a good point. Cheap coffee was all I knew about before. So I used to work with him, and I would give him coffee, and he'd be like, "Oh my, this is amazing! I can't go back to Keurig, or I can't go back to his Winco cups of coffee." But that's what it is. Unfortunately, it's on mass scale, and it's unfortunate the quality of it. But that's the biggest difference between specialty coffee and like the work that you do with farms and providing resources and tools and education and providing quality.
Well, and I get a little bit on my high horse, and it's not about Long Miles and what we do. It's about what you buy as coffee. Like if you go to the grocery store and buy a $7-8 a pound coffee, really what you're buying is poverty coffee or slavery coffee. Like that coffee is causing farmers to go further into poverty. Yeah. And that's the nature of, that's commodity. That's the world. That's
reality.
That's what we want.
I mean, that can cross over to clothing. It can cross over to a lot of industries that are on that scale of mass production of a product, right? That's either based in the United States or around the world, is that you have that issue. Aaron says, "What? Oh, go ahead."
Yeah, no. I'm just thinking like that. It's a real challenge because I know I've got like a plain black T-shirt on, but I don't know the factory that it was made from. I don't know who the workers. I don't know if they're treated fairly. And it's a little bit ignorance, and ignorance is bliss because it is so comfortable. My eyes like this. Yeah, it's just like comfortable. And I just know it. But I know coffee. And I do know that if I go to Costco or Sam's Club and just grab something off the shelf, chances are that I'm creating slavery somewhere. Yeah. I'm deforesting a rainforest, and I'm causing people to slip further into economic hardship and poverty. Right. And it's tough. And Christy and I, what and co-founders, we look at it and we're like, we're not enough.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
we just did on the website. Yeah, on the website you can see we just did the impact survey and we're like, yep, there's impact, but it's like no amount of impact is going to really be enough.
Yeah. And that kind of goes along with Aaron had a question. What's the biggest hurdle to getting your general consumer into higher quality coffee? What's that hurdle there when it's so easy accessible around and they go to Starbucks or the Dunkin' Donuts and
Yep. Well, I think a lot of people think, okay, I can't buy, I'm drinking now this Passenger coffee.
Right.
And this, and Passenger just happens to be one of the roasters that we work with. And we work with like these specialty niche roasters.
Oh yeah.
Who want to make sure that the producers like Long Miles are treating our employees and all the farmers that we're working with and our own farm labor, because we have our own farms as well,
right,
treating them fairly, having fair wages, ethical treatment of the environment, and then producing stellar coffee.
Yeah.
So the question is, what's the hurdle to get consumers into like a better quality coffee, or I would just say a non-poverty coffee? The first thing is like people just don't even realize it. I think that like the people watching your Twitch stream, the people that are your friends and my friends, once they know it, then it's a conscience choice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, can you keep doing something that's hurting people?
Yeah.
And I know it because I'm a coffee producer and I can see neighbors and I know other countries and I know production. But like, if you didn't look into it, you probably would never know that you're drinking poverty coffee.
It's true. That's the reality of it, and it's kind of like, oh, this is a touchy subject, but it is the truth when it comes to this sort of thing, because you're working with people, right? Yeah, it's a coffee bean, but it's people that are touching that bean first, right?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's so cool. For those that are just joining us, we have Ben here from Long Miles Coffee. Him and his wife have this incredible coffee project that they worked with different farms, and they import some of the best coffees, Burundi coffees, and they're expanding. We do have their socials here, so we'll throw this in chat. Follow them on Instagram. Check out their website. Just tons of amazing information. We'll see if that works or not. Probably won't work because everything breaks the day of. But we'll throw those there in a second here if it doesn't pull up. But it's huge. So real quick, guys, we do have a special treat from Ben and from them, from Passenger Coffee here. This beautiful Heza. Can you tell us about this coffee? Can you share and shed some light on exactly what we're going to be brewing here? And I'll brew it with us here.
I got my, there we go, the Heza. Yeah, so Passenger is one of the original roasters that's worked with Long Miles, and we've been producing coffee since 2013. So this was our ninth coffee harvest and production, and what they do is we've got 3 washing stations, and Heza is actually one of our washing stations. It's on the edge of the Kibera rainforest. It's at nearly 2,000 meters above sea level on the edge of this rainforest. You got this microclimate where there's constant rain clouds and cloud cover that's just floating around, coming like just kind of like brewing almost off of this rainforest. And Passenger, they're buying, and man, they just love this, and so they buy a micro lot a year, and I think they've done it since nearly the inception of Long Miles. And they take this one micro lot and they make it available year round through their website and their cafes. And they can do that because Passenger is kind of unique, along with a couple other roasters that we work with, that they freeze all of their green coffee upon arrival, and that allows them to serve this Heza micro lot throughout the year. So they make a plan. They figure out how much coffee they need to buy a micro lot big enough. They put it into a deep freeze, and they just draw out coffee throughout the year as they need it.
Which is crazy because a lot of people don't do that. Oh, my camera froze, but we'll fix it here. A lot of people they don't do that. They run out, and then you have to like wait for it's annoying because it's like, no, the coffee's gone this season, no, and then you have to wait. And
yep. Well, and I think that it's one of those things where like they freeze the coffee and it's expensive it'd be easy just to throw the coffee in a warehouse somewhere or in the basement, but they recognize that when you freeze coffee and you put it in the deep freeze and you treat it very specially, it's in Grain Pro, so it's a sealed plastic bag within a jute Hessian sack, and then they can pull it out when they need it, and so that just makes it as fresh as the day they got it for as long as they want it. So it just makes it really unique. And I mean, there's other companies that do it. I know we work with George Howell and they do it. We work with Phil and Sebastian in Canada and Calgary. They do it. My fuzzy background's not going to let you see it.
No, you're good. And I can show it here again because you have the same copy. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yep. Yeah. And so what's nice about this is like year round, I can always go to Passenger and order up a haze, and it's the micro lot that we just produced the last of. So that's
awesome. That's how cool is that though? Because I freeze my own coffee too, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna freeze this and save it for later. And I think I have 2 Burundis from Brandy wine that, which is Brandy wine. The quality that they do. It's just like, I think that was the first one that I honestly had, and it was like, oh my gosh, I gotta save this. Like, it's just, I'm not kidding. I don't exaggerate. I'm like pumped when I drink their coffee.
Oh, I love Brandy wine. And the other thing about Brandy wine is who does their design work?
I know, it's so like, cool. It's all screen printed and everything.
It's just beautiful. I'm just like, I need to like be ensconced in Brandy wine branding. It's they do such a good job, and then their coffee matches it. I mean, usually what I do is I'll order a bag of coffee from like a Passenger or Brandy wine or anybody who's roasting our coffee, but then I'll always try like a Colombian or a Honduras or another coffee, and they don't disappoint. And so
no, it's like it's I'm not kidding. Brandy wine is the one coffee roaster that I'm like, these guys continually, no matter what they roast, I'm like, that and like Onyx, I'm like, what are you guys doing? Like, so what we're going to be brewing, guys, here is just on a Kalita Wave. So it's a flat bottom brewer. You can treat it just like a V60 as far as grind size. You may go a little bit finer because it has just a little bit or even honestly just listen to your coffee, because I've done both where it's been a little bit coarser or finer. We have 16 grams here, and we're gonna go ahead and zero out our scale here. We're gonna do, so what I'm gonna do for this particular coffee, because now listen here, this is the reasoning, because of the tasting notes are black tea, raspberry, I like to stretch my brew. So instead of a 1-to-15 ratio, I do a 1-to-16 ratio, because I find like tea coffees that are tea, like oolong tea or jasmine, they just shine a little bit brighter when it's expanded just a little bit. So same thing, we're not going to follow like a pulse brew, we're just kind of flow with it. But 1-to-16 for these types of coffees, in my opinion, they're usually pretty tasty. Aaron says those raspberry notes are so nice. Oh man, when you find a coffee that's got like lemon or raspberry, it's like, oh geez, like it's just one of those things. I don't know, but we're gonna brew this here. So one thing in particular as well, and I don't think they have it on this bag. Do you know what process they did this at this farm? Of course you do. What kind of dumb question is that? Of course you know.
Well, the reality is we do honey process, we do natural process, and we do fully washed process. And this Haza and the Haza that Passenger gets every year is a fully washed coffee. So we're drinking a fully washed Haza micro lot. And what their buying program does is we separate each hill by each day. So it's kind of like wine, and they'll drink through.
Wow, that's crazy.
So they'll cut through, and we've got 5 different hills at Haza that we work with, and we separate it by day, and we'll cut through it, make sure that there's no defects, make sure that everything is beautiful. And then usually Passenger selects a combination of 3 to 4 different days, and that'll give them maybe like 50, 70, 60 kilo or 132 pound bags of coffee, which will last them the year. And so they'll put together maybe a Gitwe, Honge, and a Gashubi Hills to make this beautiful micro lot just from 3 separate days or 4 separate days of production. Wow. and all fully washed.
And just to briefly describe, so like I've had, we'll let this continue to brew. We'll do a total yield of like 256. That'll be a 16-to-16 ratio, or 1-to-16, but there's 16 grams in. So 256, switch it on. And Ben there says in chat a 1-to-17 ratio. That's crazy. You can't do that. Of course you can. You can do that. Yeah. It's what you can do whatever you want, you know?
It's me. Yeah. But I like the 1-to-15 ratio often. Like that's like my go-to is 1-to-15. It's just rich, nice body. I've been leaning 1-to-17 also because of those raspberry, because of like when I see a black currant, like if I'm drinking a Kenyan, if I'm drinking a Burundi, often like 1-to-16, 1-to-17 does just draws out some of those beautiful flavors and some of those really, really kind of like, I would say East African flavors is what I call them. Man, you got a nice little setup there.
This is our on the go setup. At any moment, nice. Everything can just spill over onto everything, so it's cool.
Yeah.
That happened one time where it spilled. I'm like, oh no, my mouse pad.
Yeah, you're licking off your counter.
I know, like, seriously.
Well, because the reality is like, and I'm looking at this bag of coffee, and I open up. It's a beautiful bag. Like they changed their packaging.
They changed their packaging just recently.
It's a bio bag, so like
that's
fully
cool. Yeah.
Like compostable, like in commercial compost. But you look at the roast profile, and they have a lighter roast profile than some roasters that we work with, and so it's kind of one of the things that I, going back to Alan's question before, is like, how do you get people to like drink not poverty coffee? And I think part of it is find a coffee that you really love. And now with online ordering and shipping, often shipping worldwide is
pretty light.
It's pretty light. And some people don't like this light coffee. Some people like a little darker roast. So what I love to do is I'll look at all different roasters until I find, man, this roaster nails it. And you're like, I'm this guy. And then usually what I would suggest to people do, get a subscription to that roaster. You're going to save money. You're going to get it shipped to your house, and you're going to get some killer coffee every month. And you usually get like a roaster's choice, and you'll get a Colombian one month, and you get a Burundi the next month. And it's just find a roaster that you like and just drink better coffee.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe a little less amount because maybe it costs you a little more, but then it's
ease into it, Yeah. So that brings us to, one of the main topics that we kind of talked about. We haven't quite touched it on our, I think of these as the building the block episodes, because the first episode we talked about what specialty coffee is with Trevor Gramow and Sabbath. Episode 2, we talked about tasting notes and how it's subjective to your own experience. Alex out in his Alexander Mills, his coffee blog and everything like that, he had such cool insight on exactly how we should taste coffees and how we should look at them. And really this episode, there's so much detail into different coffee processes, and you have firsthand experience being with the particular farms and the different processes. Like you said, you guys do a honey. Well, what is a honey? What's a wash? What's a fully washed? What's a natural? And kind of give us like the because we really can talk about every particular process, and there's new ones always popping up, anaerobic, and then there's ones that are like just crazy. Like everybody's just like trying everything. It's just like blowing up as far as in the industry of different methods. But what are some typical consumer terms that they would see on a coffee bag that would be, oh, this is a natural coffee. This is what happens to the natural or washed or honey, and we'll kind of go from there.
Well, I think I would jump in right away and say that the most common coffee that you're going to get when you just take a bag off the grocery store shelf is going to be a washed coffee.
Right.
And what that means is that we've got these machines that we take all the coffee harvest, and coffee is a cherry, actually. It comes off a bush, and it's a cherry. And so wash process peels the cherry off of skin off the cherry, and then we actually ferment the seed with the mucilage or the pectin on it for 24 to 36 hours in a big vat. So we got these great big vats. All these cherries sit together, and you can either add water or just keep them dry, which is actually just slimy mess of mucilage-y seeds, and you let that sit for 24 to 36 hours, and then you wash it. What that means is you wash off all that mucilage, all that fruit, and then you put it through a grading channel, which separates all the lighter, defective beans. Right. And then we let it soak for another 4 to 6 hours. And then you take those seeds and you put them out on tables in the African sun, and they just dry until they're 10.5% moisture content. Right. That's a washed coffee. And that's your typical coffee.
Right. And there's a big debate, natural is better than washed, but they both have characteristics that are, some of the best coffees are washed and some of the best coffees are natural. Natural coffees, they can be consistent in one area and vice versa. It's all kind of a preference, because I've had both coffees and I'm like, oh, this is amazing. Like, I've had this roaster called Blanchard Coffee Roasters. They're out in like Indianapolis or someone out east, kind of where you're at in that area east. And they had like a package where they had 3 different El Salvador coffees that were all processed 3 different ways. There were honey processed, like red, black, and I think actually yellow, which is all kind of like how much mucilage or whatever that's on it, correct?
Correct.
And they were like, all 3 of them were outstanding coffees from the same farm. They did a different process, quite a little bit different, but they were like delicious. And it was like, oh man, these are like outstanding. Huh?
Well, and I think that's the thing. It's like, there's some people who just love and they go gaga over a natural. And natural coffees can be spectacular, and they're fruit bombs often.
Exactly, yeah.
And they're just like, you're drinking this, you're like, this can't be a coffee. This has got to be like a blueberry. Like,
and those are my favorite coffees to share, is natural coffees, because exactly that. They'll either ask like, oh, does this have like flavor added to it? No. This is completely natural, and I'll be honest. When I go to coffee shops or I get coffees, I try to pick the naturals that they have, because I know that they'll be fruity and delicious, and it's just my sort of profile. But then I'll go on like, okay, this is the origin of it, and these are the tasting notes for a wash, and then I'll usually get it. But 9 times out of 10, I'm like, washed coffee or natural coffee, I'm like, I'm gonna buy that. Delicious.
Yeah, and I think that's the reality. And we learned the hard way that, and I can pick it up really quickly when I'm tasting naturals now. You can do naturals really poorly.
Oh yeah.
And you get that funk, and you get that like stewed fruit, funky,
like fermented almost, like winey, you know. Yeah. And there's some coffees that I've had that are wine-esque, right? They have like a very finish of a nice like red wine, but then there's some that are like, oh, this is like too much.
Like, it turned the corner. And that was our first year. The first year we tried naturals. Oh, we screwed the pooch. That was wrong. I mean, we just, oh man. So it really comes down to, you can't just do a natural on this is how you do a natural. Yeah. You got to know your specific environment, your rainfall, the sun, all these things. And so like, it took us probably 4 years to figure out how to really do a good natural. And still, every time we do it, you got to be so careful. Yeah.
So then along the processes, a natural coffee, briefly go through that. It's a lot simpler in the sense of like less steps, but it's still just as important.
Yep. So a natural coffee, we start the process the same way, where we receive the cherries from whoever picked them, and we float them in tanks of water. And what that does is, any cherry that has one of the seeds inside is defective, they'll float to the top of this barrel.
Because you won't know until,
Oh yeah, exactly. Because they're in the skin. There's just like a cherry. So, but after we float those cherries, what we do is we remove any underripe or overripe cherries in a pre-selection stage. And then instead of peeling off the skin and fermenting, we put them directly into the sun with the skin on, and just leave them there. And it usually takes us 30 to 40 days in the sun to dry those cherries out until they're 10.5 moisture content. And that's your natural process.
Yeah. And it's real simple. And like we said, that fermentation process is like essential to what a natural is. It's fruity, and the sugars in there are just having the time of their lives. And delicious. Briefly go through kind of what I talked about with you guys. Also do a honey process and what that looks like. There's and I could find it later and post it. There's a really good visual of black, red, and yellow honey process, just because the color, not necessarily the color of my red, black, but it's very evident between how much is left on there. But briefly describe that for a day. Yeah.
So honey process would be we're taking
kind of like the middleman. Yeah. Like middleman step. Like lazy. I didn't want to really finish a whole natural here.
It's kind of risky to do the natural, but it's kind of I wanted to do something a little fun with it. So essentially you take the skin off the cherry, but then instead of fermenting and washing off the mucilage, you just took that sticky mass of seeds, spread them out over the table, and then let it ferment and dry in the mucilage on the table.
There you go.
So, but one thing I didn't mention was, like, in each of these processes, we have to have staff at the drying tables for at least
every step essentially.
Every step. It's like 20 to 45 days. Somebody is taking care of that coffee on the table and just spreading it out and making sure it dries evenly, and taking, if there's any defects, they're removing it out seed by seed.
And this is so good. Like, it's been a while since I've done a Kalita, and I'm glad it worked out, but it is like, I'm getting so much raspberry in it, like the tangy raspberry, and it's sweet, and it's just like, it's a delicious coffee. Like, congratulations. And Passenger, they roasted it and they did an incredible job. Like, again, Passenger, I should have linked it in there. I did. No, I linked the other one. Alan Jelly, send me some. Bro, just come to my house. You live literally down the street. Literally, come get coffee.
What I think we find about, like, in the flavor profiles when you're looking at coffees, if you want something super in your face, fruity, and you see a natural, take the natural, because it's that blueberry muffin. It's that plum. It's that fruit shower. But if you want something just like sweet and clean and sparkling, it's usually going to be a washed coffee.
Yeah.
And that's
super clear, like clarity, like you have more complex flavors. Like my buddy Al right here, he, like I said, I used to work with him, and I gave him a coffee, and I don't remember what, I think it was a Colombian coffee maybe, or Guatemalan, but he had one that he really enjoyed that he always talks about, and it was one that had more grainy tasting notes, not in a bad way, but like oats and barley, like that sort of thing, and like malt I think was one of them, and it was so like precise, and I'm pretty sure it was a wash. It was so precise in that area of it being like oatmeal or oats, like that sort of flavor profile, and it was really good. It's not my cup of tea as far as my preferred tasting notes, but it was really cool for him to like experience like, what, this is like exactly like it tastes like the oats and the barley, like it, or like, and I've had some that are like hops or that sort of like process in it, and it really only can be done with washed coffee, the origin of it, the way the roaster decides to roast it, and all that, which is, there's so many parts to it, and it's fun to see like, oh wow, this coffee tastes like this, incredible, like what?
Exactly. One of the most stellar coffees I've had was actually from Dogwood Coffee in Minneapolis. I don't know if you know Dogwood, but
I haven't had their coffee, but I've heard of them.
So they had this Colombian, and the roaster told me, get ready for creamed sweet corn. And
interesting.
I was like, what? And I drank this coffee, and part of it is like, when somebody tells you expect blueberries, you're probably gonna taste blueberry. But I tasted this coffee, and it was not about subjectivity. It was pure sweet corn, and it was so delightful. And it was a Colombian coffee, and I'm like, I've never had a sweet corn coffee, and I'm like, I'm hooked. It was beautiful.
Interesting. That'd be one of those things that I'm like, what? We were talking on the last episode too. like Kenya coffees, and this can lead into particularly to your Kenya project that you're working on as well, is that, you know, me and Alex were talking and we found that we like a lot of profiles, a lot of roasters that they end up like, I personally cannot handle a single origin espresso shot of Kenya. For some reason, it just comes out tomatoey and it comes out acidic. Like I'm like gagging. I'm not kidding. Like, and I don't gag at coffee, but when it's like espresso, obviously it's concentrated and way more strong.
Yep.
But with those Kenya particular coffees, I was like, I can't do it. Like most Kenyas, like if they have that any sort of region of tomato or whatever earthy, I'm like, I can't. But there was like a coffee, again, tailor-made out in Oslo, Norway. She roasted a coffee with her pilot program, and it was tomato basil, and it tasted so much like creamy tomato basil, and it did not give me the gags, and it was like incredible. But like you said, it was washed coffee, and it was delicious, right? Yeah. Subjectivity aside, it was delicious.
Well, and that's the thing, is like how you produce it matters, but then how you roast it matters, and then how you brew it matters. And so, like, I mean, just jumping into even what you said before is like what other methods, but now we've got yeast added coffees, and we've experimented with that. Yeah. And
I'm trying to think if I've had I've seen a recent roaster that has done something particular to that.
And part of it, I know that, like, I want to be really careful here, because like it's something, it's unique, and it's something that's kind of pushing the boundaries in some ways. Yeah. But also it's like, it's covering up the terroir. Yeah. So it's like replacing the flavor notes of Burundi with these yeasts. So there's some amazing yeast you can use, and you can take a washed Burundi coffee and make it taste like a natural Ethiopian. Yeah. And that's great, but if I'm producing Burundi coffee, I want to taste it like a Burundi coffee. Yeah, absolutely. So we experimented with some yeast processing, and it does add some value potentially. Yeah. But we've decided, let's rather showcase the terroir, the what does Burundi have to offer, and we're veering away from yeast process and instead experimenting with things like carbonic maceration, like limited oxygen fermentation. Right. And I don't want to call it true carbonic or true anaerobic fermentation, because I think we could get into semantics about that, and somebody could jump on here and be like, wait a minute, it means this or this. Really what it means is we do have a process where we have barrels and we seal them off, and we have almost no oxygen interaction in the fermentation process. And then we do that for like 36 or 64 hours. Yeah. And then we produce that coffee, and it's a uniquely different coffee. Yeah, and it's one of those like those trendy things, right? Not to water it down or disrespect the work and that people have done to discover these methods. You're kind of seeing a lot more do that method, the anaerobic method of removing that oxygen completely. Alron says, it seems like quality coffee industry still has a lot to discover. They do. I mean, like I remember maybe it was 5-6 years ago, you started seeing this barrel aged coffee where they put the green coffee into barrel, a whiskey barrel or whatever. Like that was a thing at the SDA in Seattle one year, and I was like, and I'm not gonna lie, there was a couple importers that had a coffee by particular roaster there, and I had it, and I'm not kidding, it tastes like whiskey. I'm not a whiskey person, and I know what whiskey tastes like and it smells like. And this coffee straight up tasted like whiskey, but without the alcohol. I gave my boss this roaster out in Colorado, Hotbox Coffee Roasters. They did a whiskey barrel aged coffee where they set in there for like 3 months, and the green coffee, and then they roasted it. And I'm not kidding, like it was 1,000%. Like this has got to be whiskey, but without the side effects of actual alcohol. But like you said, they are essentially covering up the quality of the coffee with this particular process.
with barrel aging, they're taking the roast profile like of the roasted barrel and they're using it with the beans. It's a cool process. It's a cool way to look at a coffee and offer a coffee offering. But you often see like those particular methods, they don't survive. I haven't come across a barrel aged coffee in a long time. Like, in all honesty,
The reality is, Michael, like coffee tastes the best when it's fresh.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why Passenger freezes their coffee. So if you're putting it in a barrel and letting it sit for 3 months, it's degrading its natural.
Yeah, and it was really
quality.
good. It was really interesting. It was one of those coffees that I can go back on and say like, whoa, like, yeah, I've had this coffee that was infused with like a whiskey, and it was insane how much it tasted like whiskey, but still tasted like coffee. Right. Well,
and Alan's saying here there's coffee fads, and absolutely. And the problem with coffee fads is that oftentimes I'm a coffee producer.
Yeah.
So I'm a farmer.
You're like, stop that. Keep it coffee.
Yeah, exactly. Just like, I'm like, there's a demand for anaerobic. There's a demand for a while. There's a demand for yeast processed coffee, or there's a demand for natural coffee, and some of these can add value. But the problem is a lot of times roasters will reach out to a coffee producer, say, if you could just do this anaerobic, we would buy it. So then, but it costs money. Like, we got to buy barrels, we got to buy valves. We have to have one person dedicated to a micro lot, churning barrels, checking to make sure they're off gas, making sure no oxygen gets in, making sure they don't explode.
It's not as simple as just turn on the switch.
No. So and then at the end of the day, we have to cup that coffee, and that coffee still might not taste nice. And then no roaster is obligated to buy that coffee. So we've gone through all this trouble, and yet the risk is all with the producer. So I think there's sometimes that can get risky, but also it's like the wine industry. Like, I enjoy natural wines, and natural wines is like minimal intervention wines. And I'm like, that's what I want to do with my coffee. I want minimal intervention in it, so that the Burundi is what you taste from our Burundi coffee. And now, as we're starting in Uganda, I've realized,
which is huge. That's awesome.
Thank you. And one of the reasons why we got started in Uganda is like our tagline for Long Miles is coffee, people, potential.
I love that, by the way. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, and the Uganda coffee is full of potential, because I have only had a handful of amazing Uganda coffees.
Yeah.
And the reason is the processing. Yeah. How they process, how they harvest, how they produce their coffee is just rudimentary, and you always got this chocolatey, earthy. Because literally most of the coffee you get from Uganda is just dried right on the dirt. They're just taking cherries, stripping underripe, overripe, perfectly ripe cherries, throwing them on the dirt, letting them dry, putting them in sacks, and selling them to a middleman. Yeah. So one of the things we're trying to do is, like, there are great producers selling great Ugandan coffee, but there's so few of them, it's hard to find. So we're like, well, what if we applied what we've learned over 10 years in Burundi and honed in on great harvest practice, great washed natural honey and anaerobic process, and then try to produce the best Ugandan coffees you ever tasted. And so this year we're
so excited. That's like so cool to hear. For you guys, if you're joining us late or not, this episode will be on YouTube, and we'll cut it and link it and everything, and throw it on YouTube. But what's really cool is that the work that you're doing, I love your slogan, right? Coffee, people, potential. That could be my life slogan. I will literally be my life slogan, because a lot of my close friends and people that I interact with when it comes to coffee, I'm like, here's the coffee. You'll potentially love this, and it's about people. Like, I want to connect with people, and it's just so cool, the work that you do, and I have no doubt that the work that you're gonna do in Uganda is just gonna be outstanding. Like you said, there's not a lot of good coffees, like not a lot of Ugandans that you see out there. I know I've had one from Presta out in Arizona, I believe, that had a really good one. I see the label and the color in my head over the last couple years, but you don't see a ton of Ugandan coffee. Maybe you'll put that on the map and absolutely change that, because you've done that with Burundi, and it's like, that's so exciting though.
Well, I know, and I know some good coffees are coming out of CP Falls area on the east of of Uganda. I just had one from Huckleberry. I don't know if you know Huckleberry. They're in Denver.
Yeah, we stop there and get coffee
job.
all the time. And Huckleberry, I think I have a bag still. My last visit.
Yeah. Kevin Nealon, their green buyer, he does such a good job. He just picks great coffees. And so I tried that, a bag of that. I was like, oh, this is good. So we're on the other side of Uganda. We're in the Rwenzori Mountains. It's on the edge of the Congo. It's like, it looks like Bukete, Panama, with this microclimate and this rainforest and these clouds coming in. And the first time I went there, I was like, oh dear Lord, we need to produce coffee here.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's the future of Long Miles, and we've got a great team that's going to be there. We've got Lauren and Calvin Kagori are going to be leading our team there, and then Jimmy is going to join them as well on our QC. And just it's a team. Like there's no coffee without people. Like, that's why it's coffee people potential. So like I say we're going to do this, but what I really mean is we got awesome people. Like it's amazing. Like we've got Christy and Robin do our storytelling.
Yeah.
So anything you look on that
it's like
Instagram,
gorgeous.
Like, they don't let me touch it because I'll just wreck it. It's not me. and then we got, in Burundi, we've got Raphael's running the show there and he's got a team. Seth is our quality control. Paphras is our head agronomist running our Coffee Scout program. We've got these washing station managers where they're actually putting their lives out there to impact communities to produce great coffee. And it's fun. It's fun to be a part of these guys.
And yeah, it's really cool. So I'm excited. What's like the projected date to get coffee out where you're seeing the quality? I know there's a lot of factors as far as, it's going to take this long and this harvest and weeding out and quality and processes and getting that all in place. But what's kind of what you've seen when you're taking on farm? What's that look like?
Well, it's kind of a nice process calendar because our Burundi harvest just finished. We just are finishing up dry mill, and because of COVID, who knows if we're going to find a shipping container, but if we do, we should be shipping our coffee out next week, which is amazing.
That's awesome.
Burundi coffee, which is right on the steps of within the next 4 weeks, we're going to start harvesting our first lots of coffee in Uganda.
That's awesome. That's so cool.
So that'll start kind of October, and kind of late October, our partners and our farm in Kenya is going to start producing. So
you're booking up your whole year. There's no time off now.
There is no more Disney. So we should be looking at exporting Uganda coffee in the early part of next year, and as well as our Kenyan coffee shortly thereafter.
That's awesome. That's so exciting. That I am honored again just to have you here and talking about the projects and the work that you guys are doing. And all of you guys deserve a huge round of applause because, like you said, it's involving a lot of people. And you've been doing this for a while. That with every day it involves someone touching the coffee, taking care of it, and continually exporting and producing just delicious cups of coffee. Before we wrap this up, again, guys, this episode will be on our YouTube here. We'll link it here shortly, as well as on our Twitter. We'll link that as well. Just the full episode of us just talking briefly of coffee, this delicious passenger coffee that was given to me by Ben here and the coffee they produced. Outstanding cup of coffee. But today we've just been able to talk briefly about the work that they've done. Like, the reason why I started doing these coffee podcasts is to kind of bridge my two worlds, because for the last 6-7 years, I've been into specialty coffee, finding out information, networking, connecting, talking, discussing, sipping cups of coffee, creating content all towards the specialty coffee industry. And so the last 3 years I've been streaming and been doing things and been creating content. And I thought, you know what? Two of my passions colliding is gaming and as well as coffee, sharing cups of coffee. If people know me in person, my wife, I probably embarrassed my wife so many times offering people in random places cups of coffee and saying, here, try this. Like I'll have it in my little fellow Carter mug and I'll share it with them. And the last work trip that I had, I did the same thing. I went to the dining area, left the hotel. And so I had my cup of coffee. I said, hey, can I get an empty cup of coffee? Which is interesting because normally people don't just get an empty cup of like a coffee cup empty. And so I shared it with the guy, and he was like, whoa, this is incredible. This is an amazing cup of coffee. This is crazy. So I'm always sharing coffee. So that's why I do these episodes, is just to connect you guys with specialty coffee. Like, it's just so huge. And that's my biggest passion, is connecting people with delicious cups of coffee, because it really does change. And the bigger picture is it's sustainability for coffee farmers, right? For producers that are on the ground level. So that's briefly what we've been talking about, guys, as well as just different coffee processes. We can really elaborate on each process and how it contributes. But a lot of it's finding a bag of quality coffee that's roasted quality, and it doesn't really care what process they do, because if it's a quality roast, quality coffee bean from the source, chances are it's going to be outstanding. Ben, before we close, your closing remarks on some tips and tricks, maybe, or just sharing your thoughts on specialty coffee and what's out there and what you're excited to see unfold.
I just say to people, find your local roaster. If you can't find a local roaster, there's so many great roasters that can ship
I will
you.
find it. I will find you the roaster. Yeah. I'll do a Google search.
Ask Michael. Yeah, exactly. And find a good roaster. And the reality is if a roaster shares the name of the producer,
that's a huge
located, that's a tip. If you see that instead of just Africa or just Central American coffees
or 100% Arabica, Robusta, whatever. There's
nothing.
There's real fast. There is a local to Utah roaster. I'll call them out. Black Rifle Coffee Roaster. And we went to a new shop just down south a little bit that they just opened up. And I'm looking at these coffee bags, and I'm like, there is no information on these coffee bags. I'm like, you lost me. It's done. I can't pick a coffee because you have no information. All it is dark roast, 100% Arabica. No information. I told my wife, I'm like, these guys don't win. I'm not buying from them because I have no information. No information. But that is a huge tip. That is huge. That's like the first step.
Yep. Just look. That's all I would say. Find a local roaster. If not, look online. See what if they're offering information on the place they're getting it from. Yeah. Chances are that you got an ethical roaster.
Yeah, that's awesome. Perfect. Well, we are going to close this, guys. We are going to take a real quick break before we start playing some Apex. Guys, if you have not followed the channel, feel free to follow. We do these coffee episodes hopefully about every 2 weeks, if not once a month. We'll again throw these up on YouTube so you guys can rewatch them. And Ben, thank you so much for your time, and Long Miles, the people and Robin there helping coordinate this. I am so excited to continue to do these episodes, and I'm so honored to have you, Ben, sharing your information and sharing your insights on producing coffee, because you guys are on the ground level and you guys are contributing to the cup of coffee that we drink today. And that's so cool to see, from farm to cup. You never see that. We're seeing it today, folks.
Thanks a lot, Michael, and I'll catch you on the Apex channel.
There you go. See you guys.
All right. Thanks a lot.
See ya.